you know, all the things that someone does, those kinds of deeds, they follow you, okay? But the kind of person you are, that's more important, what you're basically made of. And our congressman is really made of that type of honesty and integrity and really belief in the human values, you know, that we all stand for. And so it's my particular pleasure at this time to present the Monroe County Honorary Society Democratic of the Year Award to our Congressman, Matt Cartwright. In appreciation, Matt Cartwright from Monroe County Democrats, May 5, 2018.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you, President Jane. It's wonderful. How about a round of applause for our president? Really well put together dinner and well organized. Yes, it's true. I went to Hamilton College in upstate New York. And, you know, Marion and I have two boys. Jack is our elder, and Matthew Jr. is the younger. And Jack went to Hamilton College too. He got into it. He was nervous about getting into college, so he applied to 21 of them. And when I applied to college, you had to write out a special essay, or type one out, you know, on the Smith Corona typewriter. And you won't remember that, Sarah. But nowadays, you just have, you know, you have the mouse in the one hand where you copy and paste all your essays, and Mom's credit card in the left hand. So he ended up getting into 14 colleges. And of course, then we start the hand-wringing about where we're going to go to college. And he came down to between Hamilton and Wake Forest. And I said, Wake Forest, you gotta go to Wake Forest. You gotta go to Wake Forest. It's nice there, you know, we'll go to Wake Forest. Well, he chooses Hamilton. Why do you want to go to Hamilton? And he said, well, it's chill, Dad. And then he found out what chill means in February in Hamilton College. And it is true that I served as president of the freshman class in 2013, and I was the president of the Democratic freshman class of the 49 of us, and there were 34 of that other party. And it was, I mean, in truth, it's like being the social director. You're expected to throw parties, and what we found was that if you want to get the Republicans to come to the party, which I did, you have to have a good speaker. And so we worked hard at getting good speakers, and one luncheon speaker was Bill Gates, and everybody came out to see Bill Gates, and he spoke about the fight against polio that he and Melinda have undertaken. They're this close to eradicating polio, along with Rotary International. My breakfast speaker was Madeleine Albright.
Oh, wow.
Now, Madeleine Albright would have a hard time peeking over this podium. It's about yay high. But you're talking about a giant in American diplomacy. And she was wonderful at the breakfast, and I gave her a suitable introduction, and almost as nice as the one that I just got. And it came to pass that about 3-4 months later, you remember, well, it was the first time Assad had used chemical weapons on neighborhoods in Syria, and at that point, President Obama was going to throw the question over to the Congress about whether we should bomb airstrips in Damascus and places in Syria in retaliation for that. And I was, you know, struggling with that, and I said, well, let's call up Madeleine Albright. And we had some back and forth, but we ended up on the phone together. And she spent 25 minutes on the phone with me about that. And did you ever talk to anybody that every word of advice that came out of their mouth was, as soon as they said it, you knew it was true, and it was wise, and it was good. That's what that was like. You don't talk to that many people like that, and that's how I felt. And such great guidance she gave me, and God bless Madeleine Albright. But I wanted to mention that since you mentioned being the social director. You know, I bring you greetings from Washington, D.C. A place where unspeakable things are happening. Horrible things. People where they talk openly of cutting Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. I mean, you see a lot of things that, well, oh, this is just Democratic scare talk. Democrats trying to scare seniors into not voting Republican. But guess what? It's not. They talk openly about cutting those things. They refer to them as entitlements, as if it were some sort of gift. This is something that Americans have paid into their whole lives, and people who, there are loads and loads of people right here in northeastern Pennsylvania who survive on nothing but Social Security or old age retirement benefits. Average benefit per month, $1,305. And they want to cut that. Or they want to cut the annual increase. You know, the annual increase, seniors get a letter from the Social Security Administration every December. You know people like this. They open up those letters, and more often than not, their increase is 0. Or sometimes they hit the jackpot and it's 2%, which is immediately eaten up by the premiums for Medicare Part D. So it's awful. And to speak openly of cutting those increases, it happens. That's one of those unspeakable things that's going on in Washington. But there are more. We have the continual ignoring of our infrastructure needs in this country. You know, the current administration promised very solidly that $1 trillion would be invested in infrastructure. And it made very good sense to a lot of people, and they liked that promise. And then when we found out what the fine print was, it was 20/80. Well, 20% is going to come from the federal government, and 80% is going to come from the state and municipal governments. Well, Maureen, I love you, but you guys are broke. And there isn't any 80% coming from Harrisburg, and there isn't any 80% coming from Terra Probst, or it's just not happening. This is all just an illusion, and it's irresponsible, because we have a responsibility of standing up for our nation. Right. And properly husbanding the assets that have been passed down to us from the generation before, and taking care of the roads and the bridges, and taking care of the water systems and sewer systems, and all of the infrastructure that serves as the grease for the American economy to go. And we have to take this seriously because other nations are doing that. China is building high-speed rail. and investing in its infrastructure, we have to compete with China, or else our workers and our small businesses and our big businesses are not going to be able to compete with those areas of the world. And it's not just China, it's everywhere else that we have to compete with. Washington is a place where education and the Environmental Protection Agency are run by people who don't believe in those concepts. It's horrendous. And I could go on, but I think you're already depressed enough. What we wonder when these things occur in our country, what we wonder is, does our voice matter? Do we matter? It's hard not to think, you know, with all this going on, despite all of our best intentions, what difference could we really make? Well, the answer is a lot. You know, I served with a gentleman in the United States House of Representatives named John Lewis. I first met John Lewis during orientation. It was freshman orientation in December of 2012, and they threw a wonderful, magnificent dinner for us in the Library of Congress building. And if you haven't been there, put that on your bucket list, because that's just an awe-inspiring edifice. We were having dinner there, and they told me where I was sitting, and there was an empty chair next to me, and I didn't know who that was going to be, but I sat down, and you know, it was a buffet-style dinner. It was marvelous, and I think I had duck. And I sat down, and who sat next to me? John Lewis of Georgia. And I'm not often tongue-tied, Claudette. I'm not. But I was. But I managed to squeak out, well, Mr. Lewis, do we always eat like this? And he said, well, let's see, it's Tuesday night. No, Tuesday night's usually takeout. But John Lewis uses an expression, and I want to quote that, and it's, "You are a light." Did anybody ever hear him say that? He said that, "You are a light." And that's kind of the theme of the talk tonight. I was with John Lewis and my friend Doug Jones, who was a trial lawyer and a prosecutor, and now he's the United States Senator from Alabama. And we had a very full and robust delegation from the United States House of Representatives, most of us Democrats, and we went down to Selma, Alabama, in March of 2015 to observe the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday right in front of the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. And President Obama was there, and he gave a speech to end all speeches. It was wonderful. And it was so special to be there with John Lewis, because you know what he did there. It was March of 1965. And he was surrounded by people, I want to remind you, he was surrounded by people who wondered if they could really make a difference. The nonviolent marchers going across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, they wondered if they could really make a difference. Agitating for voting rights throughout the South, against the Jim Crow laws. And they were with John Lewis, and they were marching with him, and they were savagely attacked by the Alabama state troopers. And it was something that was caught on national television, because it was a Sunday, and everybody watched the Sunday evening news, and there it was. these savage acts of cruelty being perpetrated on non-violent, non-resisting protesters at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And John Lewis perhaps took the worst blows of all. He got sent flying. He had a head injury that opened up a big wound on his scalp. He was bleeding terribly. But it got on the news. It got on the news. And when it got on the news, everyone in America saw what had happened. Everyone saw it. Decent, caring people in America saw this. Among the millions of people all over our nation, millions of decent, caring people saw this, and they were outraged. And I'm here to tell you, it lit a fire. They saw it, and they demanded action. They demanded action on behalf of those nonviolent protesters. They demanded action on behalf of the cause that John Lewis was espousing. And guess what? The Attorney General of the United States, Bobby Kennedy, he heard them. And the President of the United States, Lyndon Johnson, he heard them. This is a man that knew how to move legislation. And within 4 months of Bloody Sunday, they moved the Voting Rights Act of 1965 through the United States House of Representatives, through the United States Senate, was put on the President's desk, and he signed it into law to end discrimination in voting in America. And that, and that was something achieved by these people who were wondering if their voices mattered or if anybody would listen to them. An amazing, momentous occurrence that they were able to achieve. And that's what John Lewis means when he talks about you being a light. You are a light. And I'm here to say it's all still true. You, each and every one of you, you are a light. You know, we had another demonstration of that recently. And I don't mind telling you that the whole time I've been serving in the Congress, I started telling you about the freshman orientation process. One of the weeks that we had in freshman orientation, it was a whole month-long process, and you have a lot to learn on how to be a member of Congress. We spent a week up at the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Learned a lot there. I was sitting next to a fellow freshman congresswoman named Elizabeth Esty at the Kennedy School when suddenly she took a phone call on her cell phone. And she listened to it, and you could see her face went ashen. And something was terribly wrong. And we had become friends at that point. She leaned over to me and she said, "Matt, I have to go. There's been a shooting." Elizabeth Esty was elected to represent Newtown, Connecticut. 26 people had just been gunned down in that school at Sandy Hook. 20 of them toddlers. Unbelievable horror. She left, she dealt with it, and it seems like it's been an unending stream of these shootings since then. And you know, on the Democratic side of the House, I'm very much like Maureen Madden. I've been serving in the minority my entire time in the Congress. And, you know, discharge petitions and amendments and everything that Maureen is telling you is true in spades in Washington. The Democrats are powerless when we're in the minority. Elections have consequences. And so nothing comes up that the Republicans don't want to come up. Even something so non-controversial as the most modest gun safety laws, like the concept of no fly, no buy, that if somebody is so highly suspected of having engaged in terrorist activity or having terrorist connections, that they're not allowed to fly on commercial airliners in this country, that those people should not be able to buy a firearm quite as quickly as other Americans. The concept is called no fly, no buy. This is something that is supported by something like 91% of Americans, everyone including Democrats and Republicans, has huge, widespread support in this country, but the Republicans wouldn't bring that up even for a vote. And it is frustrating, Maureen. It is a horrible frustration. We got so frustrated that 2 years ago, you might remember, we staged a sit-in on the House floor over that. We did, and I spoke at it. You do everything you can to try to raise your voice and try to make a protest, and we did that. Still to no avail. Still to no avail. And then something else happened. We had the Parkland, Florida shooting at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. And what happened after that? You know, those teenagers started to speak out themselves. They spoke out. They were all over the news. They were all over the country, appearing all the time and everywhere, protesting what had happened and asking that somebody do something to protect them, protect school children from these shootings. And what happened? Do you know that at least 2 Republican congressmen in Florida have now disavowed the NRA, are turning their backs on the NRA? Yeah. And Brian Mast from South Florida completely changed their position. What happened? Those kids were shining their light, weren't they? It's just a further illustration of the truth of what John Lewis teaches us, that you do make a difference. And ladies and gentlemen, it's not so long ago that you made a difference. In 2015, you remember we had 3 people running for Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. It was Christine Donahue, it was Kevin Dougherty, and David Wecht, and they were the fabulous candidates, erudite scholars of the law, and they were up for election to the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. We all worked really hard to get them elected, and they got elected, and look at what happened. You would think, all right, so we have a Democratic majority on the Supreme Court. Well, this decision, that decision. Oh, you realize how momentous that was that we did that?
Yes.
I've been serving with a Pennsylvania delegation these 5.5 years with a delegation that is 13-5 Republican from Pennsylvania. Even though Pennsylvania pretty much votes 50-50 Republicans and Democrats statewide, they had this outsized Republican majority in the congressional delegation. Why? Gerrymandering. That's right. And it took the intrepid move of the new Democratic majority on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to remedy this, and they've done it, and they've given us a map that not only contains shape that you do remember from geometry class, but it's a map that gives everybody a fair shake in running. And I'm here to tell you, we have a really, Number one, it's a great shot in the arm for the democracy of the United States. But number two, I'm here to tell you, in the current climate, we have a very good chance of changing that from 13-5 Republican to 11-7 Democrat. So when you help those 3 wonderful candidates for Supreme Court Justice get elected, you were shining a light You were making a difference, and look what a difference it has made. It's wonderful. You have the power, your voice matters, your work matters, and it always will matter going forward. There is an energy out there, and you can feel it. I mean, you saw it in the election of Doug Jones. You saw it in the election of Connor Lamb out by Pittsburgh. A fine young man. I'm really looking forward to serving with him. And you see it again and again and again all over the country. It's something that you've got to remember. And I want to leave you with this. I want to quote the entire thing that John Lewis said about You Are a Light. Here's what he said. You are a light. You are the light. Never let anyone, any person or force dampen, dim, or diminish your light. Study the path of others to make your way easier and more abundant. Lean toward the whispers of your own heart. Discover the universal truth and follow its dictates. Release the need to hate, to harbor division, and the enticement of revenge. Release all bitterness. Hold only love, only peace in your heart, knowing that the battle of good to overcome evil is already won. Choose confrontation wisely, but when it is your time, do not be afraid to stand up, and speak out against injustice. And if you follow your truth down the road to peace and the affirmation of love, if you shine like a beacon for all to see, then the poetry of all the great dreamers and philosophers is yours to manifest in a nation, a world community, and a beloved community that is finally at peace with itself. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not 2016 anymore, it's 2018. Now is the time to use your voice. Now is the time to do the work. Now is the time to shine your light. Thank you all so very much.